Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
It's brazen, and we're concerned for public safety.
Another round of scammers targeting seniors. How to protect yourself and your loved ones.
Centers the puck. Virtanen scores.
A former Vancouver Canuck has been charged with sex assault.
Folks are so stressed out about housing here in Vancouver. It's been going on for too long, and this is part of the answer.
And it's a massive shift for Vancouver housing, why it's hoped the change will help bridge the gap.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin tonight with a big increase in scams targeting seniors. More people are being tricked into handing over thousands of dollars in cash to criminals. Dan Burrett joins us live with more on this. Dan, there are calls on all of us to help protect those who are vulnerable around us. But first, can you talk about how big this scam is?
Anita, we don't know the scope BC-wide, but police say it is happening everywhere. Vancouver police say they're now looking into more than a dozen incidents in just over 2 weeks. It goes like this. Someone calls an older person claiming to be a grandchild or relative in jail, needing thousands of dollars in cash for bail. The victim takes out the cash, and in some cases, a fraudster goes to their house and picks up the money, like in this video here that police released. The latest victim was hit yesterday. Police say a 73-year-old woman in South Vancouver received a call from someone posing as her granddaughter, claiming to be behind bars and needing 10 grand to get out. In this case, police think the fraudster did some online sleuthing beforehand.
What is concerning about this case is the fraudsters knew that the victim was of Portuguese descent and even said words in Portuguese. It created the illusion that this was a legitimate request. We believe the fraudster most likely researched the victim through social media to learn specific details about her and then targeted her specifically.
Police do have some advice for everybody. Talk with your older loved ones and friends and neighbors about this scam. Remind them not to hand over any money if someone calls asking for it. Vincentine says police and courts will not ask you for money over the phone to get someone out of jail. That's not how it works. They recommend you privatize any personal information you have on social media. And they're also calling on people who work in banks to watch out for older clients. They may know them by name, their routine, how much money they normally take out or deposit, and can sense when something is wrong, as if they're taking out a lot of money all at once. And if the employee is uncomfortable, it's best to call police. Scams like this have also cost victims thousands of dollars in Delta and West Vancouver, and police across Metro Vancouver are warning you to be careful. And Anita, I know you'll have more on this with the RCMP later in the show.
I will. Dan Burrett live tonight. Thank you. Former Vancouver Canucks forward Jake Virtanen has been charged with sex assault. It's in connection with a September 2017 incident in Vancouver while Virtanen was playing in the NHL. The VPD says their investigation began in May last year after the alleged victim filed a complaint. That same month, the Canucks placed Virtanen on leave because of the allegation.
When victims do come forward, we do everything that we can to fully investigate. And this is a perfect example of how our detectives conducted a very thorough investigation the second that it did get reported to us.
Virtanen is currently living in Russia, where he's playing professionally in Moscow. Through his agent, he says he is cooperating with police. He released this statement today, saying, in part, he denies the allegations of non-consensual sexual contact with the complainant, and he continues to maintain his innocence and looks forward to defending himself at trial. Well, Vancouver City Council is paving the way for single detached homes to be developed into as many as 6 smaller units. The goal is to help middle-income earners, which are described as households making around $80,000 a year. But as John Hernandez reports, some are questioning whether it will be enough to keep young families from leaving the city.
You could call it a new door into Vancouver's hot housing market.
We could all use homes. Folks are so stressed out about housing here in Vancouver.
On Wednesday, City Council passed a new rezoning policy called Making Home. At its core, it will allow owners to turn single homes into as many as 6 stratified units that can then be sold.
So that'll bring a lot of extra missing middle housing. There'll be ground-oriented housing. It will look very similar to houses in the neighborhoods, just a little more densely packed.
Staff will spend the coming months developing guidelines. 2,000 homes will be targeted for development. The city says dollars generated from increased land values will be reinvested.
So a lot of this is captured by the city and either put into affordable units in the new buildings themselves, or captured by the city and used for infrastructure investments.
For longtime housing density advocates, it's a step in the right direction as benchmark prices for homes in the city climb above $1.2 million.
We are going to get way more units in single-family areas, which is most of the city's land. We are going to allow people to have much more housing choice.
But some critics say the plan doesn't address the needs of young families.
For a family, you really do need to have 3 bedrooms and have some outside space.
This former city planner says the smaller units proposed by the new plan might really only serve singles or couples and continue to box out families.
I would suggest that may be the cohort that we currently have in Vancouver, which are the people that are below family forming age and the people above family forming age.
The mayor contends the plan will benefit families in the long run by generating money for future affordable developments. Homeowners should be able to apply by next year, with those new units coming online in 2024. John Hernandez, CBC News, Vancouver.
We're learning more tonight about the 4 bodies found in a Richmond home. The 2 women and 2 men were all members of the same family, and one person held a valid firearms license and had access to guns. But as Susanna De Silva tells us, what happened inside the home remains a mystery.
Forensic examiners continue to pore over a suite in the home at the end of the lane, but at this point, police are releasing very few details about what exactly happened inside. Today, they confirmed that the 4 people were members of the same family, that they were all adults, 2 men and 2 women. But they say that this was not the result of intimate partner violence, that they would not describe it as a murder-suicide, but that they are not looking for any suspects, and that everyone involved was found inside that suite. They did confirm that someone inside did have a firearms license, but did not expand on that detail. Now, police were called to this home on January 25th after a report of something unusual and came to check on the family, and that's when they found the victims. But they believe the deaths actually occurred about 24 hours before, and they are still asking anyone that saw anything unusual on that evening to please come forward. Now, autopsies are being conducted on the bodies, and they're also at this point trying to notify the next of kin. Susanna De Silva, CBC News, Richmond.
A memorial dedicated to survivors and victims of the St. Paul's Residential School in North Vancouver has been vandalized. RCMP are now investigating after parts of the arm of this ceremonial figure was torn off. An artist who helped carve the monument says other features have been broken. The work is in honor of the more than 2,000 Indigenous children forced to attend the Catholic school between 1899 and 1959. A Squamish Nation councillor says the damage has been triggering for some families, adding they've reached out to the Archdiocese to work together on repairs. 13 more British Columbians have died from COVID-19 in the last 24 hours. It's a stark sum. In fact, over the past 2 days, 34 people have died. That's the highest number of fatalities in 48 hours since the second wave. 28 more COVID-positive patients are in hospital since yesterday. That total is now 977. At least 5 more people have been admitted to critical care. At 141, ICU admissions have risen 114% from a month ago. Ongoing outbreaks are now at 62. 2 more facilities have declared outbreaks since yesterday, while 1 has ended. Well, CBC has confirmed the RCMP is investigating a BC-based website accused of selling fake certificates for mask and vaccine exemptions. Mounties in Chilliwack are investigating enableair.com, which you can see here. It advertises, quote, authentic medical exemptions related to COVID-19 for a long list of reasons, from allergies to eczema to personal belief. It does not list a price for the phony document and does not offer refunds. The site appears to be connected to a cultist-like doctor and a second BC doctor who is accused of spreading misinformation about COVID-19 and vaccines. The health ministry says these certificates do not carry any legal or medical validity. And the province has extended funding for free and affordable community counselling services in BC. It's investing $4.2 million to expand those existing services. The impacts of compounding emergencies are taking a toll on people's mental health, with the minister pointing to the pandemic, toxic drug crisis, extreme weather events, and the suspected discovery of unmarked graves at former residential schools across the province.
When people make the brave decision to step forward and seek help with their mental health, we want them to be met with care regardless of their location or their pocketbook.
The investment will support 49 community agencies providing counseling. According to the province, the funding will help those organizations keep their costs low or free through to the spring of 2023. Well, single seniors living in BC are facing unique pandemic challenges that have left many isolated and lonely. Uneasy about the risks of exposure, some remain separated from their social circles and communities. And tonight, we want to share a few examples of the kind of help that's possible. As Janella Hamilton shows us, comfort can be a friendly voice on the line or a caring knock at the door.
Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate this service.
At 83 and living alone, Liz Thunstrom says the last couple of years have been extremely difficult.
It's the isolation, I think, that was the hardest part. Not seeing family for special occasions, not just having hugs and laughing with somebody.
But there's been a bright spot, and it's lifting her spirits in more ways than one.
And you kind of looked forward to the meals coming because you knew you'd have someone to talk to, as well as a nice meal.
With the City of Coquitlam's meal program, volunteers like Bill and Linda Ray have helped bring more than 30,000 meals to people's homes.
We got a lot of the seniors that we delivered meals to who wanted to talk on the doorstep.
Just checking on them, making sure that they're doing okay, especially when they don't have family close by.
Some of them were quite a long chats that I had, and some of them are quite short. It really depends on the individuals.
Like so much during the pandemic, the city has had to adapt to meet people's needs, from food delivery to fitness classes.
It's a tough one because there are, even within the senior community, varying opinions and varying levels of comfort. So we've got the instructor in a space with in-person participants, and it's also being Zoomed to a group who are at home.
Thunstrom, who has a lung condition, says she's still hesitant about in-person activities.
I belong to an exercise group, and I'm not comfortable going back.
She's not the only one. The South Vancouver Neighborhood House says they have had to find new ways to connect with seniors who are lonely and isolated. One solution, calling them on the phone.
We had our volunteers all trained on how to make these friendly phone calls because we knew that it was going to become more challenging as the pandemic went on, as people became less hopeful for the future.
Thunstrom says a friendly conversation can go a long way.
I think the sense of somebody cares about me. They may not know me personally, but somebody cares about the seniors or the people who can't get out.
Janella Hamilton, CBC News, Coquitlam.
And for seniors and others living in long-term care facilities, how much of a risk to their health is acceptable? Is it right to force residents into isolation if that comes with other costs to their well-being? As Karina Roman reports, these are some of the questions being tackled by the Health Standards Organization as it considers new national recommendations.
The proposed standards aim to give long-term care residents more control over their lives, greater say in daily care decisions and visitor policies. Long-term care homes would need to plan meaningful daily activities and prove that they have enough staff to cover the required hours of care. As well, monitor the safety and effectiveness of that care and plan for emergencies, new disease outbreaks, and natural disasters.
I'm hoping that this will be a clear blueprint that really can enable provincial and territorial and federal action to move long-term care to where all Canadians are demanding it to go.
The standards also try to balance a resident's right to live with risk with the need to keep everyone safe.
Through the pandemic, it was actually very disheartening to see that we did not get the balance right between keeping residents safe from a virus and separating them from their families. The outcome in many cases was detrimental to residents.
The extreme isolation caused the health of many residents to deteriorate. Some families were lucky simply to be able to visit outside the window.
I feel guilty, but I knew that I didn't really have a choice.
In the first few months of the pandemic, more than 80% of Canada's COVID-19 deaths happened in long-term care homes, the highest rate among the most developed nations. Today's report from the Independent Health Standards Organization does not delve deeply into infection control measures. Those proposed standards, along with other standards addressing infrastructure, will come from the Canadian Standards Association in February. But the adoption and enforcement of new standards will require provincial cooperation and money. During the last election, the Liberals vowed to bring in new long-term care legislation along with $9 billion. But many worry that won't be enough to get the provinces on board. Karina Roman, CBC News, Ottawa.
Meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe is back, or here for the first time today. Joe, I cannot say enough about this day. I think it was pretty much needed for a lot of people.
It was so lovely, Anita, to see the sunshine. Once that morning fog burnt off, it was still chilly, but widespread sunshine for almost everyone across the South Coast. Let me take you to some pictures, though, this morning, taken by none other than our own Dan Burrett, out for a morning stroll at Queen Elizabeth Park, seeing that dense fog to kick off the day. It stuck around sort of until mid-morning and then clearing out for most of the South Coast. Still sticking around in the Strait as we speak, and it's beginning to build back in, but nice to see that outflow, those winds going from the valley and the interior towards the coast, clearing things out quite quickly. Current temperatures right now, a 1 at YVR, so yes, we will get sub-zero tonight. Speaking of tonight, sunset, 5 p.m. this evening, first time we hit 5 p.m., so things are beginning to look up. Dense fog advisory still in place, but I think once we get through some patchy fog tomorrow morning, and places like Campbell River, you've been socked in for days now, so that advisory is still in place, definitely for a reason. Dangerous visibilities and slippery conditions for one more morning, but our high pressure ridge is sinking south as a Pacific system rolls on in, and Anita, it looks like we're going to get that for the weekend, but there's a nice transition day on the forecast, and that day's tomorrow. I'll tell you all about it coming up.
Okay, can't wait. And I'm also thinking about the fact that Dan Burrett was up that early. He was here till midnight last night, so I'm not sure he sleeps.
Maybe it was on his walk home. We won't judge, but yes.
Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
The weather update is brought to you by Sophia Financial Group of Raymond James Limited. Register now for our free Cash Flow Connection series at sophiaevents.ca.
Returning to our top story now, police across the Lower Mainland are warning of an increase in scams targeting seniors. A number of elderly people have been tricked into handing over thousands of dollars in cash. For more on this, I'm joined by Sergeant Dan Michaud with the RCMP's Organized Crime Financial Integrity Section. Thanks for talking with us today.
My pleasure.
Sergeant, where exactly are we seeing this increase in BC, and why now?
Well, the location really isn't a factor, and the now is unexplained. There could be theories about it, because basically if seniors are targeted, it doesn't matter where they are. So they'll get a call, they've been identified as senior, or people will try to fish that information and make that call. Nowadays, it could be because with COVID isolation and the restriction and all of that, people feel more isolated and feel more lonely. So they'll be maybe more susceptible to be victimized by this type of fraud. And also the criminals, because of things are closing, people are more at home, there's less opportunities for them to do fraud. So they will resort to things like online scams or phone scams.
You've been doing these sorts of investigations for a while now. Which ones have really jumped out to you?
Well, one of the most common ones is called the emergency scam. And so basically what it is it had happened to my mother. She didn't give any money, but the call she got was somebody crying over the phone and saying, Grandma, it's me. And she said, the name of her grandson. Is that you? And he said, yes. And then, she thinks he named himself, but it was all her giving the information. And then it goes on to say, I don't know, I was kidnapped. I'm stuck. I got arrested. I lost my vaccine passport, could be anything in a foreign country. And the police got me and I need money for bail, for example, or money to release me from my kidnappers or anything like that. And this is when it happens. This is one of the most common ones. There's also like other ones where love scams, where people were contacted throughout social media like Facebook, where they'll say, hey, do you want to be my friend? And because they're lonely, they might get into an online relationship with somebody. And in the end, they're asked to send money for the person to come visit them. And this is how the scam will happen.
Okay, so not everybody has a son who works in this field and who is investigating these types of scams. So what can other people do to protect themselves if they are a senior, or to make sure that their loved ones aren't falling for this kind of thing?
Well, in this case, it's just to ask questions. Because first of all, the first thing, you might want to rely on the call display, but you can't rely on that anymore because the criminals can make it look like it's coming from a legitimate source. So you will ask questions. So my mom got out of it by asking, why did you call your parents, right? And they give some kind of excuse. They don't want you to call a parent or somebody else. So then in their case, you said, well, I'm going to call them, right? But it's also by asking questions. And then if you're not sure, you can say, you know what, I'm going to hang up, call somebody, because sometimes it can be overwhelming because the pressure is on. It's an emergency. The person feels really the struggle on the line. They're very good actors. So the idea is to say, okay, maybe I'll take a deep breath here. I'll hang up, or keep on the line, use another phone and call somebody.
Okay, so making sure that you're asking all the right questions and really inquiring about what's being asked of you. RCMP Sergeant Dan Michaud, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
A family of 4 from India identified as the people found frozen in Manitoba near the U.S. border. Why they were there and the investigation into the potential smuggling ring they might be tied to is next. Thanks for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream. Every winter, the Forks Market in Winnipeg holds a competition to design the most creative warming huts. Today, they unveiled the 2021 submissions. They include one that has built-in musical instruments. Take a look.
The sounds crazy kaboom!
We weren't really sure what we were doing to start with. And now that it's finished, we're even unsure as to what it is. It's a warming hut full of crazy musical instruments, and some of them are self-explanatory. You can go up to them and play them. But last night we found that a lot of people couldn't figure out what to do.
The President and CEO of the Forks North Portage. Welcome to the Warming Huts Building Blitz. Every year, an artist or architect is chosen to push the idea and the limits of what a warming hut could be. This is our 12th year of the Warming Huts competition, now a really important and beloved part of the Winnipeg winter. This year's winning huts once again challenge our ideas of art and architecture, and they are also sure to create conversation. All of this year's winning huts are, as you can see, colorful and really fun. They'll provide some shelter on the Nestawaya River Trail, presented by the Winnipeg Foundation, and they'll brighten the landscape. The warming huts are an important part of the Forks Public Art Program. Over this pandemic, we have really seen how important free, outdoor, accessible public art is to our community.
And we just thought it would be great to have a building that families can go into and have fun, make music and play and have a little jam session.
The U.S. has rejected Russia's main demands to resolve the crisis over Ukraine. The American ambassador delivered Washington's written response to Moscow in writing last night, telling Vladimir Putin there will be no negotiations on the prospect of sanctions by NATO members if Russia invades Ukraine. CBC's Moscow correspondent Briar Stewart has this coverage of the Kremlin's reaction.
Russia's Foreign Affairs Minister Sergei Lavrov says when it comes to the U.S.'s written response, there's enough there for both sides to keep talking, but he's not overly optimistic. Now, Russia says the U.S. didn't acknowledge some of their biggest concerns. They were asking for a guarantee that Ukraine would never join NATO and a withdrawal of NATO troops and infrastructure from countries that joined the alliance after 1997. Now, both of these things were things that the U.S. said it would never agree to. But in the U.S. written response, officials did say that there was enough there for a diplomatic path forward. Now, what that means is not exactly clear, but we do know that Russia and the U.S. are talking about other issues like arms control and transparency around how military exercises are held. As for Russia's next move, we understand that it's going to rest with President Vladimir Putin. Putin is going to be briefed on the written responses. He's going to assess it, and we do expect some kind of decision to come from him at some point in the next little while. And officials say it could take a few more weeks for Russia to decide what its next move is. Now, we did speak with an analyst today who said that the troop buildup is really all part of a negotiation strategy. And he said, well, he's worried that there could be escalating tensions. He isn't worried about an invasion.
So it's not new in the history of international relations, but after the Cold War, we believed, all of us, that this style of diplomacy has gone. But it's back because the de facto Cold War style relationship is back.
That analyst went on to say that he expects to see even more military drills held by Russia over the next few weeks. We do know that there is a large military drill planned in Belarus for pretty much the entire month of February. Belarusian officials have said that when that drill is over, all of the Russian equipment, like the fighter jets, the tanks, they'll all be going back to Russia. But that promise really isn't enough to ease fears among some that Russia could be planning to attack Ukraine. Briar Stewart, CBC News, Moscow.
And as the Ukraine crisis simmers, NATO members are rushing to assist the country. Canada is sending an additional 60 troops on top of the 200 already there. Similar to Canada, Germany has opted for non-lethal assistance. CBC's Chris Brown is in Lithuania, where he spoke with German soldiers about their country's commitment to Ukraine's security.
Well, you're looking at armored infantry carriers belonging to the German army. We're in Lithuania, about an hour and a half outside the capital, Vilnius, and this is one of NATO's bases that it set up in the Baltics back in 2017. The idea was to put NATO troops here, not too close to Russia's borders, but enough to send a message of deterrence. And so the Germans are in charge of this battle group, Canada is next door in Latvia, and then further up there's another one in Estonia as well. Of course, with the large buildup of Russian troops, not just in Russia, but really also in Belarus, which is about 130 kilometers from here, these forward bases have taken on much more importance. It's also notable that it's the Germans that are leading this contingent here. The German government's been under a lot of criticism that it's not done enough to throw its military support behind Ukraine as it's facing down this threat from Russia. We asked the German battle group commander here about that.
With being the framework and the lead nation here for this enhanced forward presence battle group, we are deploying on a rotational basis over 600 German soldiers here in a fighting capabilities with main battle tanks, infantry fighting vehicles. So we are already contributing to a large scale to the defense and the reassurance of the Baltics.
Nonetheless, NATO is beefing up many of these enhanced forward presence that they have in Eastern Europe with extra aircraft, with extra troops, and with extra machinery. The fear, of course, is that if there is a conflict in Ukraine, that conflict would not stay contained to Ukraine's borders, and that would make these bases, put the scrutiny on these bases here in the Baltics that much more important. Chris Brown, CBC News in Lithuania.
Back in this country now and to Manitoba, where RCMP have identified the family found frozen to death in a field near the U.S. border last week. As Cameron McIntosh explains, investigators are asking for anyone who knows how the Patels got there to come forward.
They tried to cross this field for a new life in the U.S. and froze to death.
We believe this to be a case of human smuggling.
Now Manitoba RCMP confirm it was a family of 4 from India.
They are Jagdish Kumar Patel, a 39-year-old male. Vishaliban Patel, a 37-year-old female. Vihangji Patel, an 11-year-old female. And Dharmik Patel, a 3-year-old male.
The family comes from Dingucha, India, where smuggling operations are known to advertise a better life in the U.S. On January 12th, they arrived at Toronto's Pearson Airport. Somehow, by January 18th, they went from Toronto to Manitoba, an hour south of Winnipeg, east of Emerson, where their bodies were found the next morning. Police can't confirm how they got there.
We need anyone who had interaction with the Patel family or has information about their journey to the border to think about what they went through and to step forward.
They aren't commenting on reports 6 people in India have been arrested and say they weren't previously aware of organized north-south border crossings in Manitoba.
So our agents intercepted them and picked them up.
But U.S. border agents tell a different story. 7 other Indian nationals crossed in the same spot that night, some wearing boots with footprints previously seen in the snow here.
And so we'll see periods of low and we'll see periods of high. And I do think we're entering a period of high.
These networks are quite sophisticated.
This Canadian lawyer who handles human smuggling cases into the U.S. says asylum cases from India are on the rise.
Was there a broader network out of Toronto or Montreal where other agents or people?
So far, one man found allegedly waiting for the family on the other side of the border has been charged in the U.S. RCMP won't say how he fits into their investigation. As for the other 7 who crossed, they're all facing deportation back to India. Cameron McIntosh, CBC News, Winnipeg.
A trucker convoy opposed to vaccine mandates continues to make its way to Ottawa, but among its messaging of freedom of medical choice, some troubling misinformation. That's next.
As the ministers worked on a national strategy tonight, the Premier of British Columbia was touting his provincial battle plan to reduce child poverty. Glenn Clark says Ottawa should adopt a family bonus like the one he introduced in BC last year, a plan he says works. Eve Savory has more on that story.
As a single mother, Janet Winters has reason to praise the new BC program.
It's not uncommon to run out of food or diapers, and this just makes it less likely that you're going to have to live on a diet of Kraft Dinner.
According to the province, it has significantly improved the lives of some 200,000 poor children in BC.
The BC Family Bonus, which works out to $103 per child per month,
or over $1,000 per year per child, has reduced the poverty gap by almost 19%.
Last summer, one BC resident in 10 was on welfare and climbing. And with low-income working parents significantly worse off than those on welfare, there was no incentive to work. So the province extended dental, medical, and monetary benefits previously available only to those on welfare to the working poor. Now it says the number of dependent children on welfare has been dropping by 4,000 a month.
In the past, if you got off welfare and went to work, you lost all those benefits. And so there was a huge disincentive to go to work. Now, if you go to work, you're always better off than staying on welfare.
He wants the BC program to be a model for the rest of the country, but not everyone here is buying into it.
What the BC government has done is they've reduced the amount of money that people on welfare get, and therefore bad jobs look more attractive.
Groups that lobby for the poor say the bonus does nothing for those who stay on welfare. In fact, they're worse off. They lost a $50 a year tax credit. The groups are warning other provinces not to adopt the BC plan. Janet Winters disagrees. Although the program has cost BC some $200 million and extending it to the whole country could hit $4 billion, she says the social benefits far outweigh the economic costs by giving children like her son Alec a better start in life. Eve Savory, CBC News, Vancouver.
Here are some of the stories we're following tonight on CBC Vancouver News. The 2 men and 2 women found dead inside a Richmond home this week were from the same family. One of the deceased had a valid firearms license and access to guns, but the deaths are not a result of intimate partner violence. The families have no known associations to crime or gangs. Former Canucks forward Jake Virtanen has been charged with 1 count of sexual assault in Vancouver. It stems from an incident that happened on September 26th of 2017. Virtanen was playing for the Canucks at the time. He was placed on leave from the team after the allegations in May of last year.
We are going to get way more units in single-family areas, which is most of the city's land. We are going to allow people to have much more housing choice.
The City of Vancouver has approved a plan to allow up to 6 homes on a single-family lot. This means the owners of 2,000 single detached homes can develop into stratified units. The mayor says the goal is to increase the housing stock in the city to make it more affordable for middle-income earners making around $80,000 a year. Well, the cross-Canada truck convoy making its way to Ottawa is in Ontario now. The drivers are protesting vaccine mandates for cross-border truckers, which is required by both the Canadian and U.S. governments.
When we got our vaccines when we were kids, they were a vaccine. It was a one-time deal. It was something a lot of research went into. And now it's, to me, it's basically a flu shot. That's really all it is. People that are all vaccinated, they're getting sick, they're passing it on the same as anybody and everybody else, right?
Protesters say they want the mandatory vaccine mandate rescinded. Officials in Ottawa are beefing up security and preparing for counter demonstrations. The Ontario Trucking Association says the regulations will not be changing and truckers will have to be vaccinated to cross the border. Well, some opponents of COVID vaccines and pandemic mandates have a checkered history when it comes to comparing themselves to victims of the Holocaust, going so far as to wear the Star of David. On Holocaust Remembrance Day, such claims are even more glaring. For perspective, I spoke with Ezra Shenkin earlier today. He's the CEO of the Jewish Federation of Greater Vancouver.
across the globe to remember those who were lost in really the horror of the Holocaust. 6 million Jewish lives, countless others, just real tremendous atrocity. And this is a time for memory and for thought, for introspection, when we're thinking about just the incredible loss.
Absolutely. And given the current political climate, how important is the message of the Holocaust and Remembrance Day now?
Yeah, more important than ever. I think that, for us, there was a study that just came out, a survey that was just done that children in North America, a third of children in North America, believe that the Holocaust either wasn't as bad as people say, or is a complete fabrication. So for that, we have a lot of work to do when it comes to educating people, marking this day.
So given all of that, what do you make of the rise of anti-vax rhetoric, co-opting the imagery and the experiences of people who suffered in the Holocaust? Like I mentioned, wearing the Star of David and making comparisons to the Nuremberg trials. Yeah,
it's absolutely wrong. I mean, I've done many interviews about this. I've talked about this a lot. I have gone on a spectrum, right? I started with a great deal of understanding for it. Well, people are frustrated. We have to work with people. I've now gotten to the point where, I think like many in our community, especially on a day like today, I'm irate. I think it's not only is it not true, comparing a health measures that are there to save lives to a horrible moment in our history where the actions of the Nazis were quite the opposite. It was to take lives away. It's just, they're not synonyms, they're antonyms. I mean, if we understand that, they're not the same, they're opposite. And that's what makes it so shocking and why it's so important that we continue to talk about this today.
And have you heard from people in the Jewish community here in Vancouver who have seen these things, perhaps on the media or social media, seen images, and what are they feeling when they see it?
It's painful. I mean, it's very painful. You have to understand that when we talk about something as massive as the Holocaust, when you talk about that kind of loss of life, it is not uncommon to talk to members of a Jewish community where someone says, well, they all have a story about the cousins that stayed behind and then they didn't survive, right? So many people are carrying this intergenerational trauma of the Holocaust, not to mention that we have living survivors of the Shoah still with us, having to see this, having to see the cheapening of the experience that they went through by people who are clearly frustrated, but are using putting a lens on it that's just not a lens of truth, causes a great deal of pain. And when we're talking about Holocaust education, which is so critical in this moment, it really puts us behind the 8 ball on it. When you're pushing us backwards by normalizing the misuse of Holocaust symbols. And that's really hard in a moment when we have a third of kids in North America saying that the Holocaust was either less than or completely fabricated. We've got a lot of work to do, and this isn't helping.
Ezra Shankin, thank you for being on the show today and speaking about all of this.
No, it's my privilege.
England has lifted most of its COVID-19 public health measures. As of today, masks are no longer mandatory and vaccine passports have been shelved. But as Thomas Dagler reports, the mask mandate remains in place in Scotland, Wales, and North Ireland.
Well, people here in England are no longer legally required to wear a mask in stores when they're out and about. And even if they're going to a nightclub, a concert, in a big theater, at a stadium, they're no longer required to show their COVID pass, which was a proof of vaccination or proof of a negative COVID test. That has all been done away with as the British government tries to tell people here that it's time to learn to live with COVID. Certain supermarket chains are telling people here, please continue to wear your mask inside, and indeed TfL, Transport for London, the public transit operator here, is telling people if you're taking the tube or the bus, please continue to wear a face covering.
No, of course, on the train, on the underground, I think, for the next few months, for sure, just to be safe in the supermarkets as well. So, yeah, I will do, yes.
I will be wearing a mask on the train, yeah. So I've decided that, for the moment, with the numbers of cases, I would still rather protect myself and everyone else.
Now, some small business owners have complained that this is going to be awkward for them because they'll have customers coming in maskless, indoors, in close quarters, and it'll be up to the business owners and staff to tell those people to continue to wear their mask, even though it's not legally required anymore, and that can be difficult for staff.
At the moment, we feel that it is better to stick with wearing the masks, and we want people to come in and have their hair done feeling comfortable that we are still taking precautions, because it's a mixture of how people feel at the moment. Some people feel very comfortable sitting there without a mask, but some people still don't.
Upwards of 100,000 people across the UK are still coming down with COVID every day. Britain is still recording upwards of 300 COVID-related deaths per day. Remember, England tried to do this. They did away with almost every COVID restriction last year, only to reimpose masking temporarily a few months later. Thomas Dagg, CBC News, London.
At 6:45, a live look tonight at Grouse Mountain. A beautiful day on the south coast once the fog cleared. Rinse and repeat for tomorrow. Well, Johanna has the full forecast next.
Greetings from beautiful Mount St. Louis Moonstone. I am Mr. Orlando, Moose Olympic hopeful, and this is Gary.
Yeah, I'm skiing.
No, you're not. Please get off my back, would you?
Okay.
Just get. Oh, okay. Thank you very much. Whew, and we are here today to find out what in the Olympic Winter Games is this.
Oh, I know exactly what one of those thingamajigs does. I'll be right back.
Okay, great. It is, of course, a ski pole. Ski poles are used to help skiers keep their balance to move exactly the way they want to. Poles help skiers keep their upper bodies in the right position for tight, fast turns. So you see, ski poles are very important.
They sure are. How else am I gonna roast my marshmallows to ooey gooey goodness?
Yeah, Gary, that is not how you use a ski pole. Ha! But, as you can see, my ski poles are keeping me perfectly balanced.
Do you want a marshmallow, Mr. Orlando?
Gary,
Just have a little marshmallow.
Oh!
Wow! Those poles are really helping with his quick, tight turns. Go on, Mr. Orlando! Use those poles!
The ski poles aren't helping!
Go, Mr. Orlando! You can do it! You can do it!
So what do people generally get wrong about you?
Because I look like what I look like. And I'm fat, I'm Filipina, and I have blonde hair, which are things that you don't really associate necessarily with Asian stereotypes. I find that people don't know what to do or how to react to me. And different parts of what I present invoke different responses from people. A lot of the times, because people see me as bigger and fat. I'm not afraid of the word fat. I don't think fat is a bad word, just to put that out there. People are like, oh, she probably doesn't, she's probably inactive, is probably lazy. This is my body. I love my body.
And the way you look.
And the way I look, and how you feel about it is not my problem.
Yeah.
Do you ever find that, like, that you constantly have to fight against what people think based off of just, like,
you never know, like, how you look, too, right?
Yeah.
Like, what people think about you.
Yep.
So, like, for me, because I have Down syndrome, people may think something totally different, but they don't know who you really are until you actually get to know them.
Do you find that you get underestimated a lot?
Sometimes, yes.
Yeah, me too.
Members of Team Canada have arrived in Beijing along with their coaches and team officials. Major COVID safety precautions are in place at the airport. Workers outfitted in full PPE gear and screening and testing all new arrivals. The Canadian contingent arrived on a charter flight that took off from Vancouver yesterday. It also included CBC's team of journalists who will bring you the full coverage of the games. Johanna Wagstaffe is here once again. And Joy, I took a sneak peek at the weather in Beijing, and those athletes are arriving to sun, sun, sun. Although I imagine it's pretty polluted, so maybe it's not as good as it looks.
Yes, good call. You know, well done for taking a sneak peek. I have not taken a look at the weather situation, but I bet they've got high pressure for all those suns, and that often means pollution. But you know, you and I will be chatting more about the weather over there as we head closer. Weather over here is changing. We've had days of fog, one of our longest foggy stretches in the winter that we've seen in some time, and it is coming to an end. You know, if we had this high pressure setup in the summer, this would have been a heat wave. So just a reminder of how different pressure systems act when we have different sun angles, and that sun angle not strong enough to break through the fog these past couple of days for everyone. Let me get you through the current temperatures from coast to coast. That latest Arctic wave back in place, diving back down to Winnipeg. You really only had a day's break. Also watching a big storm on the East Coast, I'll tell you a little more about in just a second. Our high pressure is beginning to shift south. You can already see the cloud streaming from Haida down towards Port Hardy. Port Hardy, you'll see drizzle tomorrow. And just taking you over to the East Coast, that storm I'm mentioning, lot of eyes on this big storm getting started for the U.S. East Coast that will affect Atlantic Canada Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. What we call a weather bomb. So deepening rapidly in a short amount of time, could be bringing up over 50 centimeters to the major U.S. Eastern Seaboard hubs over the next couple of days. We're not looking at a big slam dunk event with this low pressure system, bringing some showers down the coast. But tomorrow, I do think Metro Vancouver will see some good sunshine. It's increasing cloud on Saturday. And then here I'm pausing you Saturday morning. You can see the showers working their way down across the island. Saturday overnight is when it starts to fill in for Metro Vancouver. And some models have been pushed a little earlier. So we'll have to keep an eye on whether that's a Saturday evening story or a Saturday overnight, but expect a showery Sunday across the South Coast. Seeing one more day of sunshine for places like Kelowna, Cranbrook. Notice how it's milder up towards Prince George. Fort St. John, you're actually at a 4 tomorrow. That high pressure is swinging the milder air up and over into central and northern BC for one more day. So we will look for patchy fog tomorrow morning, but I don't think it'll be as dense as it's been the past couple of days. Everyone's sharing in some sunshine for Friday. Sunshine to start Saturday, but then increasing cloud. Bit of a washout for Sunday. It looks like it'll be an on-again, off-again forecast for next week. But Anita, as those temperatures dip pretty low for days like Wednesday, we'll be watching for snow. I'll keep you posted on that one as well.
I almost fell over there seeing that.
We thought it was over. The buds are coming out, but not over yet.
Okay, thanks, Jo.
You're welcome.
With curling rinks shuttered due to COVID restrictions, some have taken the game outdoors. The twists and turns of a sports played outside. Next.
A lot of times when I'm doing my artwork, I don't sit down with a preconceived image in my head. I let the image come to me. A lot of times it's through dreams and visions. So the exhibit here is called Ancient Spirits. It's basically a series of works that I created actually throughout COVID. It's really strange because the experience of watching a painting unfold in front of you and not knowing what it is. Actually, it's quite healing for me because a lot of times some people will say that the teachings are channeled through you. I'm just a vessel that the teachings and the messages are coming through me. That's quite humbling, I guess. So spirituality is a big part of who we are and who we were, first of all as a person and then as a part of a nation. It is probably one of the most important attributes that we have. We always included spirituality in whatever we did. When we start our day, we pray. When we braid our hair, we pray. When we smudge, when we do a ceremony, it's always spiritual. And that really is an integral part of who we are as people. So it's important for us in this generation that we recover and retain as much as possible so that we have evidence of who we were, our culture, our ceremonies, our language. They're all on death row. If we don't recover that, if we don't begin to bring those teachings to the next generation, then we'll be a forgotten people. For me, art is a vehicle where I'm able to express what I've learned and what I've seen, and to share that. Because our elders would tell us that our teachings are meant to be shared. They're not meant to be held on. The reception that I've received so far is really overwhelming. I had no idea that my images and my words would actually move somebody. I attribute that to, I guess, a higher power, because when I'm painting, there's something in my DNA, something in my blood that wakes up and transfers itself onto the canvas. To me, that's my ancestors that are making themselves visible. And when somebody else in an exhibit like this comes and looks at my work and they're moved by it, that's their ancestors that are being triggered by an emotion.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
Get Metro Vancouver news that matters to you all in one place with the free CBC News app. It's easy to use. Open the app and set your local tab to BC for news that's curated to you. And you can even watch live streams of CBC Vancouver News at 6 with Anita Bathe and other CBC News broadcasts on the go. Download the free CBC News app and stay connected to where you live.
While curling rinks in Beijing are getting primed for the Winter Games, back here, many rinks across the country are still closed because of the Omicron surge. But that hasn't stopped one man in Quebec from bringing the sport outside to the frozen Gatineau River. Sandra Abma tells us he's even changing things up with some rather unusual curling stones. Have a look.
Oh, hit and roll. Look at that. Look at that. Yes. Oh, you got it.
Silver curling stones glide across the frozen surface of the Gatineau River on a makeshift curling rink where friends can gather for a friendly bonspiel on a cold winter's day. The rink and the stones are the results of the labor of Chelsea resident Doug Taylor.
It's a fair amount of work because every time it snows or every time the river changes, and it changes frequently, the ice changes and there's work to put it back into shape.
The gleaming silver curling stones add a bit of class to the occasion. They're the result of a little ingenuity and following the instructions Taylor found online.
They're mixing bowls filled with concrete with galvanized metal handles. I bought a bunch of inexpensive mixing bowls online. The recipe called for filling them with concrete and using a galvanized handle, and then a little bit of garden hose around the outside as a bumper.
And I can't go over the hog line.
That's right.
Okay.
For curling pals who've dropped in this brisk afternoon, it's a great way to banish the pandemic blues on a cloudy and chilly winter's day.
I think it's great. Yeah, it's. I'm really quite surprised how well the stainless steel bowls slide. The scenery is magnificent, and it just feels great to be out here. Quite a wind blowing. It feels very Canadian.
When the sun sets, the rink is lit up with torches, and curlers can gather around the fire for warmth. For Taylor's curling pals, it's a great addition to the neighborhood and a great excuse to get outside.
I think Doug is a real community builder. This is quite something to have this on the river.
Sandra Avma, CBC News, Chelsea, Quebec.
Lots of people forced to get creative during this pandemic, and it's just beautiful, absolutely stunning. That is it for CBC Vancouver News tonight. Thanks for being with us, and we'll see you tomorrow.